All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. This NFL season has seen some teams bring back some vintage looks from a different era that is definitely approved by most fans. The Philadelphia Eagles brought back the Kelly Green jerseys last Sunday that defined the Reggie White and Randall Cunningham era with the franchise. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers broke out the creamsicle orange uniform several weeks ago when they hosted the Detroit Lions. Last Sunday, the New York Giants broke out the Lawrence Taylor era uniforms, as this has been a popular look among their fans since they went back to it for certain games. The Seattle Seahawks are set to break out their beloved throwback uniforms that define the Steve Largent era in the Pacific Northwest tomorrow when they host the Cleveland Browns. And the same can be said for the Tennessee Titans, as tomorrow when they host the Atlanta Falcons, they're going to break out the Love Your Blue uniforms that go back to their days as the Houston Oilers. Now, sometimes less is more. And, we've seen some teams go away from their vintage look over the years in order to sell more merchandise. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You look at the Green Bay Packers, they will have an alternate uniform from time to time. But for the most part, they've never wavered from their vintage green and gold look. The same can be said for other historic NFL franchises, such as the Chicago Bears, now the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Dallas Cowboys. Now, of course, in 2012, Nike became the official outfitter of the NFL. And of course, they've had to put their touch or spin on it, if you will. You think back to the Color Rush uniforms from about 10 years ago. And of course, it stayed with the league. We see a lot of teams basically with the one color from head to toe. Black cleats, all black socks, black pants, black jerseys. Same thing with white, red, green, whatever. It's part of the style. Of course, the players love it, and it starts from the high school and collegiate level, and now it's graduated up to the pro level. But I think about some teams around professional sports right now. The Jacksonville Jaguars, in my opinion, their best look was their original uniform, and every time that they've tinkered with it, they've made it a little bit worse than it was in the past. That's just my opinion. But there are some vintage looks. You think about the New England Patriots, their look from the 1970s and 1980s, of course. That was during the time when they went to their first Super Bowl, with the likes of Steve Grogan. And then, of course, the Tom Brady era uniforms that they just went away from when Tom Brady left the Patriots after the 2019 season to join the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's hard to go wrong with the Cleveland Browns. And I know several times over the years, the Browns have tinkered with their uniform, but you know what? Less is more. Their basic brown jersey, white pants, and orange helmet. You know what? It's a vintage look. You can never go wrong with it. The Boomer Esiason era Cincinnati Bengals uniforms. And the Bengals have switched up their uniform several times since then, kept the same helmet concept, but I think it's time for the Bengals to go back to that look, in my opinion. You look at the Indianapolis Colts, and it's simple, but it works. They'll have a little alternate thing here or there. We've seen them break out the all blues or the all black recently, but you just think about it. That simple blue and white look goes back to the days of Johnny Unitas with the Baltimore Colts. The Detroit Lions, in my opinion, I think they need to go back to the Barry Sanders era uniforms. Yeah, the Lions still have the Honolulu blue, but it's just the style of it. Going back to their days at the Pontiac Silverdome, and even before that, when they played at Tiger Stadium in Detroit. The Deion Sanders era Falcons uniforms. The Falcons have switched their uniforms several times under the team ownership of Arthur Blank. But those Falcons uniforms of the early '90s, all black with the gray pants, if not even the red ones, before Jerry Glanville got there, I think that is something that Atlanta really should focus on. I think about the Los Angeles Rams, and I wasn't the only one who said this, but I'm like, how could you mess this up? The Rams, when they left St. Louis to go back to LA several years ago, a lot of people were like, well, the Rams are going to go back to their vintage look. And they had been breaking out the throwbacks periodically, even while they were still in St. Louis. And, they wore them several times. They wore them in their Super Bowl loss to the Patriots a couple of years back. And, the fans were clamoring for that. and they got the colors right, but you know what? They still found a way to mess that up. And at the end of the day, I blame Nike for some of that as well. Um, the John Elway era Denver Broncos uniforms, and I'm talking about the Orange Crush. And if you want to take it a step further, you can go back to the days of Tom Jackson and Randy Gradishar. I mean, this is a look that I really think that the Broncos should go back to. And of course, throwbacks are not just about the NFL. You look at the New York Yankees, it's really not a throwback, but you know, their uniform is basic and plain, but it has survived the history of time. When you think about it, you just think about that a kind iconic NY on the pinstripes of their home jersey. It just says New York on the front of the road jersey, and of course, no names on the back. The Toronto Blue Jays, they have decided to go old school and go back to their vintage look. The Oakland Athletics, in my opinion, have one of the best home uniforms in all of sports. I think the all white look, green and gold cap, is classic. Obviously, it doesn't stand out as much as it did, just due to the fact that MLB has tinkered with things, and they're allowing players to wear whatever color cleats that they want. So you're seeing more players around the league wearing white cleats. So to me, I think it takes away a little bit from the A's look, but nonetheless, Oakland is still one of the top unis in my opinion. The Philadelphia Phillies, they've been bringing back the Mike Schmidt era powder blue uniforms, and it's a big hit with their fan base. And people just love to see those powder blues. I mean, powder blue baseball uniforms. Some of those classics from the 70s and 80s, you think about the Expos, you think about the Phillies, the St. Louis Cardinals, and for my money, the Phillies are at the top of that list. In the NBA, the Charlotte Hornets, they've gone old school. They're going back to the Larry Johnson, Alonzo Mourning era uniforms. Very popular then, still very popular, and it's something that I think the Hornets should go back to full time. It's not just there, in my opinion. You look at the Toronto Raptors, New York Knicks, Orlando Magic, and Houston Rockets. In my opinion, I think all of them should go back to their 90s looks. I think they were more popular, especially with the Toronto Raptors and the Orlando Magic. You think about that dinosaur on that jersey when they first came into the NBA. So iconic. The Orlando Magic, every time that they have tinkered with their uniforms, in my opinion, they've gotten worse. That pinstripe, classic from the Shaquille O'Neal, Penny Hardaway days, classic. Right after that, they did hit it on the nail with the Tracy McGrady Stars jersey, but since then it's been downhill for Orlando, in my opinion. We've seen the Lakers and Golden State Warriors bring back vintage looks in recent years, and of course, when I think about the Lakers and I think about those uniforms, obviously it's not just about the jerseys and the shorts, but it's also the old school warm ups. The big collar worn by the likes of James Worthy, Magic Johnson, Jerry West, and so many other greats that have worn the purple and gold. Then, the classic looks among NHL franchises. You think about those original six teams, such as the New York Rangers, Montreal Canadiens, Toronto Maple Leafs, Boston Bruins, and Chicago Blackhawks, just to name a few. And then, of course, the Philadelphia Flyers. Granted, they're not an original six, but it's hard to mess that up. The Flyers are stuck with that look for the longest of times, and it's in that classic mode. Sometimes, again, like I've said before, it's not best to tinker with the sauce. But this is what happens when teams are going to chase the dollar to sell more merch, and they have that right. I totally get it. But, I think some of these teams should go back to their vintage look permanently rather, but that's just my opinion. But, I'll ask any of you, what are your favorite throwback uniforms or one uniform in general? I'll give you some of mine. The Patriots from the 70s and 80s, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm talking about the old school 70s, 80s, and 90s Steelers when they had the block numbers. The Cleveland Browns, you can never go wrong with that. The same thing with the Colts. John Elway's Broncos, like I said. Junior Seau's Chargers, even though it wasn't the original Chargers look, but for me, it's just one of those where just having the lightning bolts on the side of the helmet just takes you back to those San Diego days. Like I said, Barry Sanders Lions, Dion's Falcons, the Tampa Bay Bucks with the creamsicles, you can never go wrong there. The Seattle Seahawks, and I was upset. Well, I was one of those who was upset when the Seahawks went away from this look, but it was part of them getting their new stadium, switching from the AFC to the NFC, and then of course they got a new look altogether when Nike came into the fray, and that was one of the few teams, rather, that Nike did get it right when they made a uniform switch for a team since they became the outfitter of the National Football League. Montreal Expos, obviously, this franchise, they're the Washington Nationals now, but you can never go wrong with that. Always been a popular throwback. I mentioned the Raptors. I mentioned Shaq's Magic. Charles Barkley's Suns, still one of the best looks. And, for the Phoenix Suns, they're another one of those teams. They tinker with their look. And every time, to me, I think it's gotten a little worse. That's just my opinion. Jason Kidd's Dallas Mavericks of the 1990s, with the royal blue, rather, better look for me, in my opinion, than what they have right now. The Vancouver Grizzlies, obviously, they're the Memphis Grizzlies now, but you can never go wrong with that. Carmelone's Utah Jazz. And of course, that was part of their transition from New Orleans to Salt Lake City. But still, that dark purple, the Jazz have brought it back periodically as a throwback. I'd love to see the Jazz go back to that look full time. That's just my opinion. Like I talked about with Magic's Lakers, you can't go wrong with the vintage Edmonton Oilers. And even at the collegiate level, you see a lot of teams break out the all white uniforms a lot, change their helmets, this, that, and the third. But I think, you know what? Nobody's done it better than the Penn State Nittany Lions. Very simple, very effective, just like the Alabama Crimson Tide. Very simple, very effective. Just having a number on the side of the helmet, and that's it. Michigan's famed maize and blue with those winged helmets, and even the Clemson Tigers. Those are just some of my favorites. If you check this out after this has been recorded, please feel free to drop in some comments and, just let me know what your favorites are. But I don't know about you. I'm looking forward to seeing some of these throwbacks around the NFL tomorrow. Been enjoying seeing some of the throwbacks in the last couple of years in sports. And I really do wish that some of these teams would go back to these looks full time as opposed to a part time usage or just teasing fans either way. But nonetheless, that's just my view on some of these throwback uniforms, and I wish that some of these pro teams rather around pro sports would go back to these looks more often than not. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.